Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is Black to the Future. And I have very good guests to discuss this concept and to also introduce the Amos N. Wilson Study Group. And I have with me Cam Howard, who is a member of NCOBRA. He's a board member of NCOBRA and also a member of the Amos N. Wilson Study Group, and someone who is impersonating an elder whose name is Monsong Coulibaly. I'm sorry. I'm impersonating a television producer and host. At any rate, I say he's impersonating because he's a very young elder, but he is following the African tradition, which we should always follow, and that is that we do not embark upon enterprises of great magnitude without consulting the elders. We do not presume, and I'm an elder myself, but if there was someone elder than I in the context of something I was doing, I would think that being able to get advice from such a person would be a great blessing. And I was able, up until just recently, to get a lot of mentoring from Dr. Margaret Taylor Goss Burroughs. So, you know, Timuel Black, I think, may be the only remaining elder in the city that I can go to for counsel. There may be a few others, but somebody who really I legitimately consider an elder. So I'm very happy, Cam, that you understood as you embarked upon this journey that was a necessary ingredient in following an African way.
Well, thank you.
Tell me how you started.
Well, for several, I guess, years, I've been thinking about starting the Dr. Amos Wilson Book Club, and it was just always in the back of my mind. And about 6 months ago, some thread came across the internet, and I leaked it out. You know, I want to start Amos Wilson Book Club, and I was encouraged to do so. And the sister Africa Porter, who's the co-convener of the book club, responded, "Let's do this." And so that was the impetus to do it. There were several people who responded, "It should be done." But she responded, "Let's do this." So we co-convened the study group together.
Well, you know, I think it's interesting that you chose Amos N. Wilson because, you know, we have a lot of history and we have a lot of historians, a lot of scholars and teachers, and we have a lot of study groups or groups of people who devote themselves to knowing certain kinds of information for our benefit. We did not have Amos N. Wilson, but when he lived, we had access to him, if only through audio tapes and videotapes. I tried to bring him to the city. In fact, just before he left, we were finalizing those plans to bring him to the city because he was such a charismatic and such an authentic, genuine scholar that it was just a pleasure to listen to him discourse. So you are starting out with one of his works.
Yes.
And what is that?
That is, it's African-centered consciousness versus New World Order, Garveyism in the age of globalism. And we chose this because when most people hear Dr. Amos Wilson, they immediately think of Blueprint for Black Power, or maybe Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, or some of the other works. But this one is not widely read. And Dr. Wilson always said that consciousness precedes power. And so before we can get to Blueprint for Black Power, we have to get the consciousness right. So we decided to start with African-centered consciousness versus New World Order, and then we'll go to falsification of African consciousness before we begin to pick up the Blueprint for Black Power.
Are you finding it difficult to find those titles in bookstores?
No. African World Info System is still in place. That is the publisher for Dr. Wilson's works, which he co-owned that publishing company. And they're still in operation in New York, and just call them, and we order several copies when we start each session, so you can get them from the book club, and they're still in print. It's very easy to get them even on Amazon.com.
Where does the book club meet?
We meet every Thursday at the Center for Inner City Studies, the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies at 400 East Oakwood Boulevard.
700.
700, thank you, 700 East Oakwood Boulevard. And I think I've been on some of my promotions wrote 400. So I'm glad that most people know where the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies is.
What time of day do you meet?
We meet 6:30. It was intentionally supposed to be from 6:30 to 8:30, but it's so powerful we rarely get out to about 9:30.
And you're dealing with just one book.
Just one
and
book.
one of the smaller books.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
it shows you how much power is
Yes.
in the content.
Yes.
You know, the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies has a long history. That center was founded by Dr. Donald H. Smith, who is very fortunately still with us, and he was there recently at a celebration that they had to honor him.
Yeah.
But to have an institution that was actually established by a black man and named for another
Yeah.
black man, both of whom were outstanding scholars in their fields, is such an honor. And there's an energy there, I can tell you,
Yes.
as having been a former faculty member and a student.
Yes.
First I was a student in the master's program, and then I was a faculty member, to tell you that there's an energy there, that some very serious professors, some very serious students, and one of your co-conveners, Nubian
Yes.
Malik, is he president of Utatu?
Yes, he's president of Utatu Collective, which is the black student group there.
Right.
And we were looking for a home for the study group, and we just mentioned to him that we were starting a study group, and so he immediately offered to be the host site for the study group. And so he had to do a lot of behind-the-scene works to make that happen, but it has happened, and it's a great place for us to be. And as you say, we take in that spirit and that energy that's there.
Right, and you bring it with you as well. In fact, Utatu Collective was co-founded by Donna Gentry, who was a recent graduate of Northeastern Illinois University, and she was the first president of that organization. And so I like to see the continuity of tradition, you know, that when people leave, it doesn't leave a void.
Right.
We should not allow a void to form in a place where someone with some very large shoes had been walking.
Right.
And Amos Wilson had some very big shoes. I don't know that there is another group of scholars who can fill them. And anybody who is teaching, and especially teaching young people, who has not read the developmental psychology, who has not read Amos Wilson's work, is handicapped unnecessarily.
Yes.
Because he makes things so clear. So how do you break down the discussion? Do you choose a chapter or a concept? How do you approach it?
Well, we have a unique structure that our classes are modeled after the pedagogy of the press, Paulo Freire's work.
Right.
And so we separate the classes into sections where the book club members get an opportunity to teach. And so we assign a section of reading, generally about 10 pages, sometimes a little longer, depends on how in this particular piece, it's only 2 lectures. And so the lectures are separated. So we do a section of the lecture, and sometimes we'll stay 2 meetings on one section of the lecture because it's so powerful. Right.
And that's good, to be thorough.
Yes.
And there's always underlying themes and underlying ideas. You just can't, the man was heavy, and you just cannot take on at face value what he is writing about. Now, I just want to ask Mansang to repeat the story he was telling me about how he came to have his African name, because tradition is important here. If we're talking about Black to the future,
That's right.
we certainly have to know where the past originated. We have to know what was in the past and what of the past is valuable for us to carry forward. And so knowing thyself, knowing thine own name is a very good place to start. So you were telling me the story of how you happened to have gotten your name, and it goes back a little ways, almost enough to make you an elder.
Well, first of all, Dr. Peace, I welcome an opportunity to be on your show. I'm very honored to be talking to you. And of course, my brother, Cam Howard, is an inspiration. Of course, I've been active for at least 40 years, and of course, that's a long story, but it's a process. You know, you're coming into this consciousness. Now, you mentioned the Center for Inner City Studies, where I happen to have been one of many, who benefited from the communiversity
that preceded
the Center for Inner City Studies. And of course, it was the old Abraham Lincoln Center. You know, I grew up in Ida B. Wells and used to come up there as a little guy, you know. And of course, Dr. Bobby Wright, Dr. Harold Pates, and Andy Thompson, and all of those folks created the communiversity on the weekends, as you know. And I benefited from attending those classes. I in particular attended Dr. Bobby Wright's class. And of course, this is where I began to get some understanding of alternative psychology, because he was dealing with alternative concepts. Now, he definitely had an impact on us. And of course, I took Ru'a Chiri. He had a class on African affairs, contemporary African affairs. And he had an organization at the time, the United Africans for One Motherland International. And so, you know, all of those things we're learning, and of course, the whole idea of reclaiming a name comes out of that. So I remember being a student at Roosevelt University at the time. This was about 1973. And Ru'a Chiri, some of his organizational members had already reclaimed names. And so I went to my mother with the names that I got from 3 of my comrades at Roosevelt University. One was from Nigeria, the other ones was from Ghana, and then one from Gambia. And so I went to my mother and explained to her that, you know, because she was rolling with us, you know, she was, you know, coming into
progressive.
Right. Naomi Theodoria Treadwell Gray. She's no longer physically with us, but she was, you know, developing right along with me. So I say, Ma, you know, it's no disrespect, and what I want to do is, as an act of self-determination, reclaim a traditional African name. And so I want to include you in on this, and I say, these are the ones that I'm presenting, and you tell me who you want me to be. And so she picked Monsong Coulibaly. And so I didn't go to the court system right away. It was very important that my mother, my family, my friends, and, you know, community comrades, you know, sanctioned that. Then later on in time, I went through the court system. And I've had this name for 36 years. And Monsong is a name and a word, and it's from Mali and the Gambia. It means I disagree. And the brother who suggested that from the Gambia said he understood that I had rejected the Caucasians' imposition, the imperialism, the cultural imperialism on our lives. So I disagreed with that, and I accepted that we're an African people. And so that's symbolized in the family name Coulibaly. So that's how that came about.
And the beauty of that story, you see, so that we can understand that there's more to it than just deciding that you want to be exotic. You know, you just think you'll just, you know, look in a book or, you know, get something that sounds exotic, and it means that there is a commitment. When my youngest child was born and I was reading about, you know, learning more and more about our culture, I discovered that before any institution was to be advised of her birth, that the community was to be informed. And so when they came to me in the hospital and said, you know, we came to fill out the birth certificate, I said, no, we're not completing the birth certificate here. Well, you have to fill it out, because if you don't, you will have to pay a fee if you do it later. If you do it now, then there's no fee. We just, you know, take care of it right here. I said, no, we can't do that, because she had to have a naming ceremony. And there, all of the things that had to be in place, you know, in order to determine what her name should be. Every child is born with a name, of course. Every African child has a name that signifies what the family envisions as the destiny of that child. And so, you know, you might have several names before you're finished naming this child, but the child is formally introduced to its community before it is introduced to the public at large. And so Africa Porter's father, Reverend Dr. John Porter, was my professor at the Center for Inner City Studies. And it was it was just quite natural to me that he should be the one to preside over this naming ceremony. And so we went to great pains to find out the proper way to conduct this, to make it legitimate and not just do something too superficial, ceremonial, with no essence and no meaning. And I'm taking it that the Amos N. Wilson Book Club is not ceremonial scholarship and superficial study, but people who intend to do what you sent me, that formula, GB2B.
GB2B, get back to black.
Get back to black.
Yeah, what we're doing, we are utilizing a ancient Kemetic system of knowing and achieving to lay the foundation for what we do. And I think we may be one of the few who are doing this. Rao Nefer Amen, the author of Medu Neter, gave us back this system that our ancestors in Kemet used to know and to achieve. In the West, we know by what is called the scientific method, or the Western knowing method, I call it. The scientific method. You see a problem, you develop a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis through experimentation and observation, and whatever those results is, it's supposed to end up with knowledge. That's their method of knowing. But our ancestors had a method of knowing also, and it was a spiritual method of knowing. And there was 10 aspects to it, and I'm not going to go through all of them here, but the first aspect is, what is the central theme of your undertaking? And so and you generally go to the oracles, or you go to a high scholar or teacher or sage to find out what the central undertaking is. And so we went to Dr. Wilson to find out what the central undertaking of our book club should be. And we determined that the central undertaking through his works, throughout the thread of his works, is that we get back to black. And I need this diagram to show exactly what that means. If you look at this, most of us think that right now it is the year 2011, but it's actually, we began telling time from when we first told time, it's the year 6,251. Right. And so this timeline represents 6,251 years of history, of African civilization. And here at the beginning, this green represents the time when Africans ruled in high culture and civilization. The red indicates, and we know that it appeared in Kemet. The red indicates, the first red indicates the first Aryan invasion of Kemet. First interruption of our civilization, and then we kicked them out after about 150 or so years. A great queen led that expedition to kick them out, and then we reestablished African high civilization, the green. Then there was another interruption, a red, kicked them out again. Another interruption, a red, and this red here represents the Assyrian, Persian, and Greek and Roman rule of Kemet, and where we actually lost Kemet. The black represents the Aksum Ethiopian civilization, and the green represents Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And we get up to this red, which is 1492, around the beginning of the transatlantic, or as you say, the African captive system, slave system. And then there's one slither of black right here, and that is the period in which Marcus Garvey and the United Negro Improvement Association, the African Communities League, were instrumental in creating a consciousness, an African consciousness that permeated the masses that he came in contact with. And then the end of this is where we are now. And so you see there's one slither of black. And so our central theme is we had to get back to black. And we had to get back to self-rule, African self-rule under African consciousness. And so that's what get back to black means. So that's the central theme of the book club. And so no, it's not just, you know, we're just out here just intellectualizing some concepts.
Well, you know, the scientific method, as far, in my opinion, is deficient because it relies entirely on things that are qualitative and quantitative. In other words, things must be perceived by the senses. If you cannot weigh it, if you cannot measure it, if you cannot see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, hear it, it does not exist. Well, that just leaves out most of the world that African people understood.
That's right.
So that the invisible, the things which are not seen, are very, very vital to our existence and our survival as a people. And if we ignore that very, very great aspect of our culture and our being, then we are flying blind.
That's right.
So it is proper to consult the oracles. It is proper to, as you said, you went to Amos Wilson. Why do we think that ours is the community of only the living?
Exactly.
Ours is a community of the living, the dead, and the yet unborn. Everything we do must be informed by that notion. We must know that decisions that we make today affect not only those who live today, but those who are yet to be born and those who have already become ancestors. So if we did not use an African method or an African philosophy of knowing, we would never go to anything that is not quantitative, qualitative, anything that does not exist right here and right now or have some perceptible record. We would never turn to that. We would not meditate. We would not go inside for insight, and we would not only that, but when that intuition came into play, as it always does. You know, our people call it, if I'd have followed my first mind.
Right.
When that first mind kicks in and gives direction, we would ignore that because it's not visible. It doesn't come as a process of thinking. You know, your first mind is not what you deliberately thought up to do. Your first mind is the guide that says, don't do that, don't go there, you know,
beware.
that sort of thing. So if we're going to be in harmony with the work that we set out to do, then we're going to have order about ourselves. We can't just, you can't be out here half-stepping and, you know, and taking on, it would be a disservice and a dishonor to the names of the ancestors that you just named. When you name Marcus, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, you know, when you name Bobby Wright, you know, when you name ancestors like this who gave themselves to us, for us, and then you just use their names in vain, you're not really serious, you don't really plan to build on the legacy that they have left for us, then it's a disservice, and I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of those who would blaspheme such names.
Right. I agree.
Right, right. So it's when I think about when I think about self-determination, and I think about Black power, and that sort of thing, I think about the do for self that came out of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, for example, Martin Robeson Delaney. We have such a long history.
Yes.
And when you say you look for alternatives, those are not the alternatives, those are the traditions.
Those are the traditions.
Everything else is an alternative. If it is not coming from an Asa Hilliard, from a Jacob H.
That's
Carruthers, and if it is not coming from a Chancellor Williams, a John Henry Clark, a Ben Yakinen, a Hubert Harrison, if it is not coming from an ancestor who has a track record, whose scholarship and whose integrity we know we can trust, then we may not be on solid ground. But when we are standing on those shoulders,
Yes.
then we standing tall.
Yes.
I agree with that.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted, appreciating what you said, Dr. Peace, and if I understood you correctly, for your viewing audience, a lot of times when I'm kind of on a show, I like to show and tell.
All right, show and tell.
Everybody out there in your audience may not know how these people look. So she spoke, Brother Cam, of the Honorable Marcus Garvey.
Right.
And of course, he has impacted just millions of people. And I'm reminded of one of his sayings. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, "What you do today that is worthwhile inspires others to act at some future time." And we see that in the fact that Amos N. Wilson it considers himself a son of the most honorable Marcus Garvey. Another brother.
Let me take that from you. Go ahead.
Another brother, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, has done a great work. These are both master teachers. And of course, we in the present time period have learned and seek to build upon the foundation of great men and women. Then of course,
before you move on, Dr. Amos Wilson called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad one of the greatest psychotherapists.
Exactly.
That this country, our people has produced.
Exactly. Yeah. And for your viewing audience, Dr. Peace, this is Dr. Amos N. Wilson, master teacher, very multidisciplined scholar, activist. So this is how he looks. And of course, I already showed the Honorable Dr. Bobby Wright. And of course, we can't leave these sisters out. We had a great sister. We have many great sisters. But I wanted to show Sister Ella Baker. I was sure that I brought her. Yeah, Sister Ella Baker was a master teacher who did a great work for us. We have many sisters and brothers who are master teachers and who we're building upon and who help animate us.
Well, most of the time, sisters were holding up the family. They were not in the forefront. You know, you get those out of history. You know, we all have probably seen Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, and Fannie Lou Hamer. We've seen a great many black women who were out on, whose lives were out there on the line on behalf of their people. But there were many others, the unsung heroines, who were holding everything together while men were making their mark in the world. They didn't necessarily need to make a mark. And it's when I think about the fact that we have always had this level of cooperation, like you said about your mother. Your mother was coming along right with you, even though she was your senior. She was your mother. Very often, mothers and fathers who were not advanced in terms of political and active affairs were nonetheless supportive. They held down the household. Big Mama took care of a lot of children who were not her children, who were maybe her grandchildren, maybe even her great-grandchildren, certainly children in the neighborhood. Big Mama was an icon, and Big Mama took care of babies while mothers and fathers took care of business. So we don't always get a chance to pay tribute to those. We get to pay tribute to Rosa Parks and those who are celebrated. But for many women, we don't get a chance to say, I'm in the process of paying all the tribute I know how to Dr. Margaret Taylor Goss Burroughs. Not because she was the only one, but she was a major figure among women for an extended period of time. And she gave us so very much. I like to say that, you know, even though Carter G. Woodson gave us Black History Week, which has been extended to Black History Month, Dr. Burroughs gave us the means by which we can practice Black history every day, because she gave us a museum.
That's right.
So you don't have to wait till February to get back to Black.
That's right.
You can get back to Black any day you want to get back to Black.
Teach.
By just going to either the DuSable Museum or the Southside Community Arts Center. She put up some institutions
That's right.
for us. And so sometimes we are able to sing the praises of people because they have loomed large, and other times we just need to congratulate ourselves because we have come from such a great people and we live among such a great people. And we celebrate them by keeping their memories alive, by doing what you're doing, by developing a study group. And what is your goal? What is your aim? When you finally finish this book, then you will go to another book. And you are expecting some life-changing experiences. What kinds of things are you looking to see in the course of this study group?
Well, as I was stating earlier, that the study group is based on the structure is based on the Kemetic system of knowing, and as we move down this system, understanding that central theme, which we say is to get back to Black. Beneath that is determining what are the means to get to that, to achieve that central theme. And again, we looked at Dr. Amos Wilson. The means that this book club can utilize is African-centered consciousness and neo-Garveyism, or Garveyism, the whole concept of doing for self. The internal, you know, as you mentioned, I'm with the NCOBRA reparations movement, but there's external reparations and internal reparations. And the external reparations is getting external resources from those people who did the injury to assist in the process of repair. Internal resources, what can we do from our own internal reparations, is utilizing our own internal resources. And that's what Marcus Garvey whole piece was internal repair of our people, utilizing our own internal resources. So what's different about this book club is that not only do we want to develop change amongst ourselves, but also that we replicate what we're doing. And so not only those of us who are in this particular group will be coming into this consciousness, but then each one of us is charged to set up an additional satellite group to do the same thing. And the second difference between this book club is that we are going to create businesses, and we've identified several businesses, because we can't be saying that we're Garveyites or neo-Garveyites or nationalists or Pan-Africanists, and we're not doing anything in the community, not doing any building in the community. And this first book, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, Dr. Wilson points that out. That's the legacy of Marcus Garvey there. If we're to follow that legacy, then we have to be building something in brick and mortar.
Absolutely. And I hope that something that you build will be named for him.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And it's you know, if we could stop to think, you know, Dr. Burroughs says this in her book, Life with Margaret. She was very interested in economic progress for our people. She was very interested in our knowing that it was important that we do business with each other, that when we were looking for someone whose services seek, when we were seeking services, that we looked for someone who looked like us. Mm-hmm. There was nothing. Dr. Burroughs called herself a humanist, mm-hmm. and there was nothing racist or anti anybody.
Right.
It was just practical as far as she could see, that we needed to support each other in doing the things that we needed to do, and especially those things that are big ticket items. Mm-hmm. So if we ever stop to think, when we are ready to go and purchase something, if we stop to think where we are going to buy that thing, who are we calling to render this service? Mm-hmm. And if we cannot find a black-owned company, at least we ought to be able to find a company that employs our people. Mm-hmm. We should be able to see our dollars stay in the community mm-hmm. and circulate in the community mm-hmm. enough times for it to be able to do the things for our community that they do for other people's communities. Right. Because we send other people's children to college.
That's right.
We buy other people's homes and automobiles. We buy other people's tickets to athletic and sports and entertainment. Yes. We pay for other people's vacations. Mm-hmm. You know, and when you say you want to replicate the study group, mm-hmm. I'm thinking about how easy it would be for you to make a phone call and get a group of people in your house in front of a big screen TV to watch a game. Yeah. How easy is it going to be for you to make a phone call and get a group of people in the same place to talk about a book, to talk about a book that has a plan mm-hmm. that will enable them to be able to do for self. Yeah. Now that's the challenge before us.
Yes.
You know, men tend to be, they tend to organize around their common interest in entertainment, sports and entertainment, their common interest in, you have fishing buddies and, all of this, drinking buddies. Mm-hmm. Well, it may be time to have some buddies with whom you can have an intelligent, thoughtful conversation about some ideas that have to do with the survival mm-hmm. and thriving of your own people. Because when you get through watching other people's antics and watching other people's progress, mm-hmm. you will be in the same position or in a lower position than you were. So hopefully you can get some more of these groups started.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Appreciating what you've said, Dr. Peace, if I understood you correctly. I agree with all you've said. That's a hard one, trying to get people to deal with Marcus Garvey, with what Marcus Garvey called the central concerns of life. We're, unfortunately, as Dr. Karenga teaches, victims of a popular culture. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times we don't want to deal with what we need to be dealing with in terms of nation building. Now, I just wanted to let the audience know how I kind of got involved with Amos Wilson. I've been an organizer. Back in the early 70s, I was the co-founder of the Black Body. That was a nationalist and Pan-Africanist youth organization. And of course, we met at the King Branch Library and Auditorium on a regular basis, doing work study. And of course, over the years, I had contact with Dr. Karenga's organization, US, and was used to, dealing with constant study, And I think Kwame Nkrumah said that thought without action is empty, and action without thought is blind. I learned a lot from Rua Chiri and his organization, the United Africans for One Motherland International. So, this is the kind of method that I've been used to over the years. Now, I got, kind of in tune with Amos Wilson maybe around 1998, 99, somewhere in there, when, you know, looking at his literature, it caught my eye because I've benefited from working with people who could go in depth, you know, who were master teachers. I mean, Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, was one of my mentors. Ru Achiri, Bobby Wright, Maulana Karenga. These are people that I've studied with. And so Amos fits right into that. And of course, Mr. James of the UNIA impacted a lot of us back in the day. So I had that Garvey piece. So Amos, he really, at first, I gravitated toward his psychological concepts, and I said, he's building on Bobby Wright also. Mm-hmm. And Amos really went into some things in depth that I wasn't used to. And so actually, Dr. Peace, I began to want to deal with forming an Amos Wilson study group some years back, but didn't get around to doing it. And I got attracted to Dr. Harold Pates, Dr. Andy Thompson, Professor Bob Starks, and them with the All World Community University Study Group. They were studying Amos Wilson's Blueprint for Black Power. And so that attracted me, and I became a part of that group a few years ago. And at first I thought they were just dealing with Amos Wilson's works, because, you know, we need to deal with his works. Mm-hmm. But as it turned out, they were dealing with his works plus a lot of others. So I was with them for about maybe 2 or 3 years, you know, looking at various, and we did deal with Blueprint for Black Power. Mm-hmm. Judge Bonetta Bush and, you know, a variety of people like that. But this brother, Cam Howard, when he approached me in terms of issuing a call to specifically deal with Amos Wilson works only, for the most part, that attracted me. So I'm trying to make some contribution in terms of working with this group. And I'm so glad that Sister Africa, Porter Olavier, Brother Nubian, and just a host of people have got this thing rolling. This is about what, Thursday will be what, about the 6th session or something like that? Maybe
about the 8th or 9th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we had 2 during the school break, during the school break for the holidays, and we've been back for 2 weeks,
right?
And we maybe had about 3 or 4 sessions before the break.
And something that I really appreciate about Dr. Amos Wilson is he's dealing with prescriptive writing. You know, Dr. Karenga deals with prescriptive writing. They define things, give you a critique, and then offer correctives for it. And so I've been pushing Amos Wilson over the airwaves when I'm on WVON, calling in, and a lot of people know me for that, but I'm always using him. I mean, he gives you food and ammunition to deal with, you know, what we have to deal with.
On a daily basis.
Yes. Yeah. So we really appreciate his thought and practice. And it's unfortunate that he left so early.
Soon, yeah.
Well, you know, he was here long enough to do some really good work. If any of us can do anything, one tittle of the kind of work that we've seen done on our behalf, I mean, we are such a rich people because we have always had people who were relentless in pursuing truth.
Yes.
You know, John H. Jackson comes to mind, you know, Man, God, and Civilization. Mm-hmm. John H. Jackson told me that he sat down and read for 20 years, and then he wrote. I mean, this is dedication.
Yes.
You know, sometimes when you talk to people and you mention a book and they say, oh, I read that. Mm-hmm. You know, well, you're not reading novels here.
Right.
You know, these people did not do blood, sweat, and tears for your entertainment or for something that you can just, you know, use as something to mention. You name drop the title of a book or an author. But these people were doing this necessary work because they didn't see this work. When I think about Kiara Cheatwood, who is unsung in this part of the world, or at least this part of the country on the East Coast and in Africa, he is as well known as Ayikwe Armah. And we didn't know Ayikwe Armah until he came up with 2,000 Seasons. Then now we got a 2,000 Seasons study group, and everybody wants to say, man, this brother is deep. Yeah. Well, listen, we have been living among fathomless people.
That's right.
Deep people have been doing deep work on our behalf, and we have been ignoring the depth of the work that has been done on our behalf, and walking into walls and stepping into walking across minefields, getting blown up, simply because we don't take advantage of the opportunity to inform ourselves. And so it's our prerogative and our responsibility to, if not the Amos N. Wilson book club at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, start your own.
That's right.
Study group. Meet with people for something other than socializing, card games, sports, and that sort of thing, which those things have their place. Life can have balance in it. We don't have to become ascetics and go sit in a monastery.
Right.
You know, we can have lives and we can do other things.
Yes.
Currently, I'm a dangerous woman because I got a Kindle for Christmas. Now listen, before that, my library card was my key to everything. I could just request books online and just go with a shopping bag and just pick up books, and I'm just reading all these books simultaneously. And then Cam, whenever I would mention some book or he'd think I should have a book, then he'd bring a book to me and see to it that I had books. So I have reading stations. There's no place in my house you can sit that you're not going to find books, and maybe a stack of them on the floor, a stack of them on the table. There are books everywhere, because if I get a moment, I want to be informing myself. I want to know. I want to grow. As long as I am here, I want to continue to develop. I don't want to say, I'm a senior, I'm an elder, I can sit on this plateau. No one should vegetate. We're alive, we're living, we have energy.
I agree with that.
And we can do things. We have eyes that we can see. We have brains, we have intelligence. We can learn, we can act, we can change things. We can do more than just elect an occasional mayor, an occasional president. I mean, it's interesting and it's nice that we have, elected political officials. But when we look at our history, we came from people of such high culture.
That's right.
That we came from royalty. So, we can't really be impressed for a real long time.
That's right.
Over little modicums of apparent power, because it's never ever clear how much power you can have in another man's government.
That's right.
Yes.
I'd like to add on to what you're saying, and for the benefit of your viewers, it's very important that, as you say, we exert ourselves in the world. That's what Marcus Garvey talked about. That we have to exert ourselves. We have a right and responsibility to be African in the world, as Dr. Karenga is so fond of saying. And Amos Wilson just reinforces that. Right. And we definitely, for you out there in the viewing audience, must definitely take time to turn those CDs, those music CDs off long enough, those movie DVDs off long enough to help plan our collective future. If we don't do that as a people, we will continue to come to grief. We will continue to get kicked up and down the stair steps of life, as Dr. Karenga is so fond of saying. Amos Wilson, the great one, can tell us why we behave like we behave. He is a trained psychologist. And as you read him, you pick up some of his books, it'll just imbue you with tools to kind of liberate your mind. And so that's why we have to read and do as Dr. Peace says, have books and seek knowledge.
And then think too about our children. What kind of world are we preparing for our children?
Good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what are we leaving our children? A legacy of CDs and DVDs?
Of consumerism.
Our children have to be in this world.
Yes.
And they cannot be in this world as simply the cannon fodder for wars.
Right.
They cannot be in this world simply to occupy space in correctional centers.
That's right.
You know, we're not giving birth to people so that those people can just become the hewers of water and the drawers of water and the hewers of wood. We are not trying to give birth to another succession of the kinds of people that have fallen victim to the oppression under which we live. So if you are thinking at all about your children, and especially if you're thinking of them in terms of what will they be able to do when you are no longer here to provide for them and protect them, if you are thinking about that, then you know that you can't spend a whole lot of time in foolishness.
That's right.
And I'd like to piggyback on what you said, Dr. Peace. The Honorable Marcus Garvey, who Amos Wilson is inspired by, once said that the only argument that satisfies man and woman, but particularly the white man, is power, physical, financial, and scientific. And Amos Wilson gave us this book. You know, him and his staff were able to finally get this book out, Blueprint for Black Power. And I think it says somewhere about the moral, political, and economic imperative for our people for the 21st century. And so this is what we have to be concerned about. Power, so that we can define, defend, and develop our people's interests and image the world over. We got to get it. Power. We got to break the monopoly that the oppressor has on black minds, or we are through, in my estimation. So Amos Wilson, I'm so glad you started.
That's right, brother. You know, Dr. Wilson also talks throughout most of his works that this maafa, this destruction that we've have experienced in the West in the last 500 years have taken us out of our African minds. And what we do and accept is because of that, because we're not in our right minds, we're not in our African minds. And so to get to power, to become sovereign, become even inspired enough to create a future, because he states in one of his pieces that we are like an amnesic people, a person with amnesia, then you cannot see reality, the present. You cannot see the present in a real state because you have no history of your knowledge of your past. And if you can't see the present in this real state, you can't project a liberated future. You can't conceptualize. So you're going to always be reactionary. And so that's the state that we find ourselves in because we're out of our African minds, and that we are reactionary. We're not projecting a future, an African future that's not tied to the destiny of the Europeans, not a liberated African future. We're not thinking 25, 50, 100 years down the line. Like you said, what kind of legacy are we going to leave to our children? Or what are we preparing them to create? And I don't see that in any, and that was really inspired me by Dr. Wilson, because he was thinking in those lines, and as Marcus Garvey was when he, said, where are our great men, our rulers and our thinkers, and so Amos Wilson brings the prescription, as you stated, into clear view with his works, and so I can conceptualize a world that is not European dominated, a world that African people are self-ruling, and with the proper mindset, the proper consciousness, and as Chinweizu delivered, Professor Chinweizu delivered early this year a piece earlier last year, a piece coinciding with Dr. Wilson's work, where he talks about an African education on African consciousness based on Neo-Garveyism as well. So we see this consciousness, this energy moving not just here in America with what we're trying to do and what others are doing, but also on the African continent. We have to get back to self-rule. And in order to do that,
self-determination.
That's right. In order to do that, we have to have an African mind.
We have 1 minute, and I want to be sure that we say where the Amos N. Wilson Study Group is meeting at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies at 700 East Oakwood Boulevard at the corner of Langley and Oakwood Boulevard. And Oakwood Boulevard is 1 block north of
Pershing, 39th
Street. Okay,
right.
And it meets on Thursdays
at 6:30.
At 6:30, and it's open to the public.
Open to the public,
and it's free.
Right.
And you are welcome to join them.
Sure.
And you are welcome to order your book. You are welcome to also come and learn how to start your own study group.
That's right.
But when you do join them, come with something constructive, because I hasten to add that there are some people whose seems to be they have been deputized to disrupt those things that are positive and progressive, and so we have to have a sergeant at arms available so that such people will not impede our progress. But I need to just tell you how grateful I am that you were able to come and to stay to discuss this important work that you've started. And I'm very grateful that you are following an African tradition with someone who is worthy to be your counsel, so that I don't have to worry about you.
You're still my counsel as well, my first counsel.
Okay. So I don't have to worry about you running over the cliff or doing, turning in some other direction.
Yes.
I'm very pleased that you're doing this, and I certainly would invite the viewing audience to consider joining a study group or studying on your own if that's your preference. I invite you to join the Amos N. Wilson Study Group.
It's been a pleasure, sister.
It's been a pleasure to you.
Right on.
To have you on.